Okay. Welcome, Professor Sivakumar, on platform of YourPedia Education, and I'm really thankful that you joined us today here and you spared some time for the
No,
interaction.
it's my pleasure entirely, Vijayendra. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me.
Yeah, and Professor Raghu, first I have made some kind of homework for this interaction related to you and the work you are doing and your profile. So normally my first question during interaction is about the personality himself. So sir, I want you to tell us something about your journey from Anna University, what I came to know from internet. From Anna University to Illinois, you went, and then to Georgia Tech University. That is quite commendable. So I want from your side only your journey, sir.
Definitely. So I was born and brought up in Chennai,
Yeah.
and I did all my schooling there, and I did my undergrad there in computer science. And then after I finished my undergraduate degree, I came to the US for my grad school. So I went to the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign to do my master's and PhD in computer science. And
Okay.
then after I finished my PhD, I decided to go into academia just
Right.
because I was really interested in research. And so I was fortunate to come here to Georgia Tech. I've been in Georgia Tech now for just over 20 years. So it's been
Okay.
a while.
Okay.
And Georgia Tech, and we'll talk more about it, I'm sure. I've had the fortune to work on multiple startups based on research from my lab.
Right, sir. So, Professor Raghu, was it a easy journey or difficult journey?
It was actually a pretty straightforward journey, and I would attribute a lot to the quality of the education we get in India. I think, like, be it my school or my college, I mean, this was an excellent education, and so it made it really easy for me when I came here and did my grad school. Things were quite straightforward and simple.
Okay. Professor Raghu, uniqueness of Georgia Tech networking and mobile computing GNAN. I was going through that. I
Yeah.
want you to tell us what is the uniqueness in that, and also the research group which you have made up of your own student. You talk about your research group of exclusive of the students. In my
Right.
opinion, I think a professor has that strength. If he can create the group, exclusive group,
Yeah.
wonders could be done. So, sir, can
Yeah.
you please elaborate on that particular research group and how that can be emulated by other professors also in reputed institutes?
Yeah, definitely. So my research group, we focus on systems-oriented problems, systems-oriented research and multidisciplinary problems in the general areas of wireless networking and mobile computing. And so when you think of wireless networks, it could be cellular networks, 4G, 5G kind of networks, or it could be local area networks, which are Wi-Fi networks, or it can even be smaller scale like Bluetooth personal area networks. And so our research sort of spans all these domains. From a research philosophy standpoint, Vijayendra, we tend to focus on very cutting edge research. So we tend to pick relatively futuristic problems that we as consumers of wireless technology are not exposed to right now. So just to give you an example, we're doing a lot of work in brain-computer interfaces.
Okay.
5 years from now, when we interface with the computers, it will no longer just be the keyboard or voice. It's also going to be our thought, right? How do you communicate with machines and computers around you with thought? That's a domain that we're looking at heavily. We've done a bunch of work in terms of bacterial communication, which is,
Right.
can you harness bacteria to do things for you and have them communicate? And so you can see, like, these are areas that are a bit further out in terms of seeing reality, but we are very excited about these areas because they're very multidisciplinary areas. And then when I say systems oriented, what I mean is we from a research standpoint, we do develop algorithms. That's the core of what we do. But we always translate those algorithms into working systems. So we
Right.
don't want to do research just for the sake of doing research and stay in the theoretical domain. We want
Right.
to translate them into working systems and see how it impacts the real world. And when you do that, it becomes easier to see what value your research has in the real world. And then it also becomes sometimes easier to translate them into startups.
Okay, so how do you, Professor, decide about your research group? How do you identify the students in that research group? And are
Yeah.
they only from undergrad or they are from postgraduate students also, like masters and PhDs?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Most of my students are PhD students.
Okay, that's
So,
great. Mhm.
I recruit them just like other professors do, which is when we have applications coming in into Georgia Tech, we look at the applications and we see if a student's background fits the focus of my research group. And there is an interview process that I go through in order to decide whether to recommend admission for that student into the university, and then whether that makes sense to take that student into my group. Now, from a student standpoint, especially if they're international students, it's attractive because, like when you come and work in a lab like mine, you come in as a graduate research assistant, and so that pays you a stipend and it pays all of your tuition, and you can sort of full-time focus on your research, right? And so you
Great.
can be working towards your PhD, but then you're getting paid along the way to do your research. So it works out really well both ways. And I do have to acknowledge this: any success that we've had as a group is so much because of the quality of the students that I've been fortunate to have worked with, right? And
Okay.
these are students from all over the world, but they've just done excellent research.
Okay, Professor, as you know, there are very capable students in countries like India also who aspire
Hmm.
to be in universities like Georgia Tech, and they would like to obviously work under the professor like you. But sir, what do you really think? What do you really see in their academic background when you choose them as your student for doctorate? So what do you see in that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, Vijay. I think there are two different aspects that I look for in students. One is just their academic credentials, right? Like how
Okay,
well have they done in their classes? What kind of classes have they taken? Are they appropriate for a group like mine, which is a very networking and mobile computing focused?
yeah,
So that's one aspect of it. But then there's a second aspect, which is the aptitude to do research. Like, is the
right,
student curious? Do they want to contribute to extending the frontiers of knowledge?
right,
Right. So that is something that classes cannot teach you,
yes,
because in the classes you're really focused on just understanding something. And so I look at their background and see, have they gone off and done things beyond their classwork that tells me that they have an aptitude for research, where
right.
they're willing to go off and explore new areas that might be not very certain, but they're willing to give it a shot. So these are the two sort of high-level things that I look for. And like I said, I have an interview process that I go through where the student and we interact multiple times before we mutually decide. Because it's not just a decision from my
Yeah,
side
yeah,
saying, hey, do I want to take the student? The student also has to decide. You've done a PhD, so you know this,
correct,
right? Which is, it's almost like getting married, where you need to make sure that the advisor that you're going to go work for
right,
is somebody that you want to spend the next 4 or 5 years of your life with, right?
right,
And
right.
and
That's
and so it ends up becoming a mutual decision, and then they end up coming and then working here.
okay. Professor, when some student write a research proposal for courses like PhD, what actually they do, they try to find out some kind of research gaps in the literature review, some
Yeah.
international papers they go through, find the gaps and find out some kind of a research area for them. Instead of doing that, as you just now you were explaining that the solution should be, I mean, what are the real life problems, and then you identify those problems and try to see how your research is going to provide solutions to that. I
Mhm.
want to ask you, sir, what can be the best criteria to
Mhm.
identify research area for somebody who is planning to spend his next 3 4 years, so that
Yeah.
it does not look like only a theoretical analysis of the
Yeah.
research gaps which you identified from the research papers. In fact,
Yeah.
it should solve the real life problem. So what is your
Yeah.
take on that, Professor?
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting question, and it's a really difficult question to answer as well, especially for a young student, right? Because they don't have the worldview that like a more experienced person might have,
Right,
um, and I think this is where finding the right advisor is so important, because
right,
that's what the advisor can bring to the table, which is to nudge the student, to guide them to look at certain areas because you can do research that matters. Like I really like this term, research that matters, right? And so the biggest advice that I would give students is focus on finding the right advisor. Go look at the kind of work that they've done. Go look at what kind of students they've worked with. Where are the students right now, right? Like what kind of work are those students doing?
Right.
And look at the nature of the research that they're doing, how impactful it has been. Has it led to startups? Has it led to good publications? And then once you find the advisor, like I'll give you a sense for what I do with my students, which is for the first year and a half, we don't even identify the problem. We're working towards identifying the problem jointly.
Okay.
And I'm completely okay with that. It takes a year and a half jointly after they start in my group to identify the PhD problem that they're going to work on. And that should be the cadence that I think the students should be prepared for.
Okay. Professor, my next question to you is related to your various startups, because I have seen a lot of your videos on YouTube and from the university site also. So what I found is you're extraordinarily good in your research work, but more than that, you are into development of some kind of entrepreneurship model. So I've seen that you have many startups like EGT, Asankhya, if I pronounce it properly, and Star Mobile. So these are some of the startups. So I want to take your views on these startups.
Yeah. So you're right, Vijender. I think research obviously is my passion. I like solving problems, but startups add a completely different dimension to your research, which is you're able to see the research that you do translate into real world impact in a very short amount of time. And that's what really, really excites me about startups. And so be it at EGT or Asankhya or Star Mobile, they were obviously sizable journeys because each startup took about 5-6 years from going from idea to raising money to building product, taking the product to market. And then we were fortunate that all those companies got acquired by larger organizations. But that journey was so impactful for my research and teaching, which is an interesting way to look at it because I could really see why it is important to care about impact. It should not just be that, okay, there is an intellectual problem and I'm going to solve it. Yes, there is value in it and there is a lot of merit in it. But if you can then add to it the consideration of how much impact is it having in terms of real lives, it really can elevate your research to the next level and also teaching. So my research and teaching has benefited tremendously because of the startups that I've done. And of course, more recently, I've been focused on helping students do entrepreneurship. And all my entrepreneurial experience has been really, really helpful and useful for that as well.
Okay. Professor, you said that these startups and everything which you are doing has really helped you in teaching and research. I would like to ask the question reverse. Is this the other way around also? Like I sometimes feel that a professor can be the real agent to develop the entrepreneurial model, especially when that professor is into the premium institute or reputed institutes where he has that kind of talent with him in the form of human resource. So, sir, the exclusive group of researchers in the form of your PhD students and all, can we give the credit to that group for your startups and how it all proceeds?
Definitely, yeah. Like each of my startups was based on research from my lab, right? And so even though I said it was a 4 or 5 year journey for every startup, the journey was actually maybe 10 years long because we were working on research for 4 or 5 years before we launched the company. And most of the credit really goes to the students, the PhD students who are working on the research. And at Star Mobile and at Asankhya, we did have my students come with the company. So they were co-founders, they worked in the company and they helped build the company as well. And you're right, there is, when you're doing cutting edge research, in some ways it is easy to think of a startup because things like differentiation automatically is available, right? Because you don't need to worry about what the differentiation is because that's the nature of research. When you're doing research, you're doing something that's really new. I do think there are some drawbacks as well when you do research-based startups. And the drawback goes to something that you pointed out, which is when you're doing research, you're not caring as much about practical relevance and significance, right? And so sometimes your research can take a form where in order to translate that into something that has real world impact can be a non-trivial process,
Okay.
right? But having said all that, if you ask me, okay, should a researcher or should an academician think of doing a startup? Without question, yes, they should at least think about it. They should at least think about how, if I were to translate this research that I'm doing into a real world solution, what would that be? And I would love for every academic to take a stab at it.
Okay, great. Professor, next my question is something which is the most important, and this is the topic which I really wanted to discuss with you. You're very famous for CreateX. I mean, I've seen your videos, and CreateX is a new, very novel kind of idea and a new, different kind of thing. We want first you to tell us something about CreateX, how you develop the mentorship, and how do you develop the funding for these particular ventures which you create, and what market components, as you said, we get the idea, we conceive on that idea, we develop a product, we take it to the market. So everything about CreateX, if you can tell us.
Definitely. So CreateX is about 6 years old. So I tell people CreateX itself is a startup, right? Because we are young, it's still growing. And a few of us here in Georgia Tech and a very successful alum of Georgia Tech, we got together and we launched CreateX together about 6 years ago. And our mission in CreateX, Vijayender, is to instill entrepreneurial confidence in our students.
Good.
And help them launch successful companies.
Yeah.
When people hear me say that, they sometimes think, oh, they both are the same, right? Like if you launch successful companies, you'll become entrepreneurial confident. And for us, it's not. And the reason is we don't want every single one of our students to launch a company. That is unrealistic, right? We have over 30,000 students in Georgia Tech. We cannot have every student launch a company. But we think even if a student doesn't launch a company, they can be entrepreneurially confident.
Okay.
Right? Wherever they go work for, they might go work for a Google or a Qualcomm or a Reliance or a DRDO. It doesn't matter where they go work for. They can be entrepreneurially minded inside those organizations. Okay. And now this is something that we are repeatedly hearing from these organizations, because like a Google or a Facebook or a Amazon, they tell us we are such large organizations. We want entrepreneurially minded students to come in, because these are the change agents which will keep us more relevant as we grow, right? As we go into the future. And so for us, entrepreneurial confidence is important. It's a life skill that we think we need every single Georgia Tech student to have when they go out into the world. And if you ask me as a teacher, I would argue that every single student, college student, when they graduate, doesn't matter whether they're from Georgia Tech or not, they need to be entrepreneurially confident. Now, what does entrepreneurial confidence mean? It means that you're always curious about finding problems that are worth solving. And once you find an opportunity, you have the methods and the mindset to put together the resources so that you can go solve that problem.
Okay.
Right? And so if you think of this as the entrepreneurial journey, yes, it can be applied to launch a company. That certainly is there. But this could apply even within other organizations, right? Like let's say you're a DRDO and you could apply this inside the DRDO, right? And so that's really what CreateX's mission is. And yes, we do help students launch companies along the way. But to give you a sense, this year, CreateX, we have worked with about 2,000 students. And we launched 70 companies. But if you do the math, 70 companies is only 300 founders. And so we worked with 2,000 students and we helped 300 students launch companies, but we are still proud of the 1,700 students that we've worked with. We've made them more entrepreneurially confident. They did not launch ventures, but we are still happy and proud that we worked with them, because we think we've made a difference in their entrepreneurial confidence when they go out into the world.
Okay, Professor, actually, I was more this concept of entrepreneurial mindset, which you told. This is the first time I heard, and it's a really wonderful concept. My actual query was, like, out of these 2,000 students, how do you think that 70 odd companies who will create that? Because what I know is entrepreneurship cannot be taught always. It is something which is within also. So how do you, Professor, decide that these are the students who will actually create the companies? and because there's a fund involved, because my next question is related to that only, that in the ecosystem you need to invest on those people and you have to arrange funds for that. That should not go waste. How do you decide which are going to open the company?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the way CreateX engages with students, we offer an array of programs to our students. We group them into 3 stages. We call them learn, make, and launch.
Okay.
So learn is classes that we teach on entrepreneurship.
Okay.
And so students do the classes, they get credit for doing the classes, it counts toward the graduation, right? It doesn't matter whether you're an undergraduate student or a graduate student, you can do the classes, you can get credit for it. And the classes teach them a methodology called evidence-based entrepreneurship.
Right.
And so it's a new way of thinking about entrepreneurship. Like when I did my first startup, the way I did it is I thought of an idea based on my research, and I just went to investors directly, raised money, and then I went to build product. And only after that, I engaged with customers, right? Evidence-based entrepreneurship, the argument is that is the way I did it is the wrong way to do it, right? Like it should be the other way around, which is you need to go spend time with customers first. Really understand what the problem is. And then once you're sure that this problem exists, then you go figure out a solution for it, then you build it and raise money and take it to market. And so we teach all this in our evidence-based entrepreneurship learn. And then under Make, we run research and prototyping programs where students want to build something, and we give small research like grants and mentorship and access to lab facilities for them to explore. The way CreateX interfaces with students is through 3 types of programs.
Right, sir.
We call them Learn, Make, and Launch. So in Learn, we teach classes on entrepreneurship, and at the core of it is a methodology called evidence-based entrepreneurship, which lays a lot of emphasis on founders spending time with customers before they even think of the solution.
Right, sir.
And then under Make, we run research and prototyping programs where we give small grants and technical mentorship for them to build prototypes toward problems that they're solving. And then in the launch piece, we run an on-campus startup accelerator where we take in teams and we give them funding and legal services and accounting services and design services and coaching for them to launch real companies. So this sort of looks like a entrepreneurship pathway, but it also looks like a funnel, because a lot of students do learn, and then a subset of them do make, and then a further subset of them go on to do the launch piece.
Right. So, Professor, what model you are telling, like it looks like more protected environment or protected ecosystem for the students whom you are trying to make the entrepreneur. But don't you think, sir, there are going to be tough times also during the entrepreneurial journey? But if you keep protecting somebody and do not let him exposed to these kind of environment, harsh environment, sooner or later he's going to falter. So what is your take on that? Because this looks like quite a protected model, whatever you are using.
Right. So the learn and the make phases of CreateX, I would agree with what you're saying, which is they're curricular programs, they're on campus, and they don't have as much exposure to the outside world. But the launch piece is different, because here they're launching real companies and they have to build real product and they have to take it to market and they have to work with real customers. Right. Now, yes, we are there in the initial stages of the journey to provide support. But if you think about the life cycle of a startup, we are there only for the first 3 months, in the launch phase. Because after the 3 months, they're out in the real world and they are trying to grow their company. And so I sort of look at it a bit differently, which is we are in the business of encouraging students to consider entrepreneurship, and we are creating a culture and an environment where they feel comfortable and safe to at least try it out. But then once they try it out, when they eventually go out into the outside world, they are battling all the challenges with entrepreneurship on their own, right? We are, of course, there if they need to come back to us. But I still think it's really important for us to encourage students to consider it, because most students, if you leave it to them, they are not going to consider entrepreneurship as a pathway. And so, yes, it is safe in the initial stages, but then later on, I would argue that the companies that are doing really well, like our most successful company has done over $70 million in revenue.
Okay.
They are as good a company as any other company founded by a non-student, right? And so they are still battling the real world in their own right.
Okay, so what is the role of a university or Georgia Tech in arranging this kind of investors for your students who may be having entrepreneurial idea? They're very good technocrats. They make very good product. So how many, what is the role a university plays in arranging the funding or arranging the investor for these kind of students?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, Vijendra, because a university cannot forget that their main mission is education.
Right.
That is still the primary focus, right? And so we
Right.
cannot afford to corrupt that.
Right.
And so everything that CreateX does, we still look at it through the lens of education, which is we are educating our students to become better entrepreneurs, right? And we're giving them this entrepreneurial confidence. So to give you a sense, at CreateX, at the end of this pathway that I explained, we do an event called Demo Day. And that's where we showcase the 70 startups that we launched, and we invite investors to come, and we invite the local startup ecosystem to come. And when the investors come and they listen to these founders present their startups and pitch their startups, they decide whether they want to engage with the startups from there or not. And they take it from there. And so we keep that separation somewhat clean, which is we work with them through the learn, make, launch phases. And then at the end of the launch phase, we conduct an event where we have the founders present, and then we invite investors to the table. And we are constantly making these connections even outside Demo Day, right? Because when a founder says, oh, wow, I need this kind of investor, and if we know somebody in our network that fits that profile, we'll make that introduction.
Right.
But we don't force that relationship after that, right? Okay. So our role in terms of helping these startups raise money is more as an enabler. So we introduce the two sides, and then we let them take it from there in terms of whether the founders are able to convince the investors to invest, and the investors are able to convince the founders that they should take that money.
Okay, so Professor, this learn and make phases which you said, where university plays the major role, how successful are you in making the future entrepreneur learn about the real life problems which they are going to come across in future?
Yeah, I think that's an important question. And so it is important to think of the learn and make with the purpose of real world impact, right? Yeah. So even in the learn phase, Vijendra, like on an average a semester, we have about 150 students take our signature class. Okay. And between the 150 students, they would have talked about 10,000 customers.
Okay.
As part of learn.
They do that. Okay.
Exactly. So it's not a theoretical exercise. It's not like me standing in front of the class and saying, teaching them. This is what entrepreneurship means. Okay. Even in the learn phase, we push them out of the door. We tell them, go out into the world, talk to strangers, customers. And so between the 150 students, they would have talked to 10,000 customers in a matter of four and a half months.
Right.
And so, and it's not just talking to customers, but it's really trying to understand what are the problems that these customers have. And every week when they talk to customers, they come back to class and they report to the rest of the class. What have they learned, right? What have they learned about the problems that this customer has? And then they go through the sequence of steps that evidence-based entrepreneurship has towards defining a product or a solution by the end of the semester that is really needed to solve the customer's problems.
Okay, so Professor, what are the performance appraisal parameters which you use to identify that, okay, this student with this idea can become successful, if at all there are some these kind of parameters?
Right. Again, good question. So, and then we tell this to our students as well, which is one of the real important signs of a good entrepreneur is you really need to care about solving a customer's problem.
Okay.
Doing a startup is not about you making money or you getting a big name. It's not about you. Yeah. Like if the way you build a successful company is you identify a customer segment and you really care about a problem that customer segment has, and you really care about solving it, right?
Okay.
And so going back to your question of how do we judge we really try to gauge whether the students have understood the customer's problem really well.
Yeah.
And so I'll give you an example. We had a team that wanted to build a augmented reality based navigation system. So it's like Google Maps, but with augmented reality, right?
Okay.
And so they came to us and said, oh, we're going to sell this to millennials.
Okay.
And we said, okay, go find out if millennials really have a problem that augmented reality needs to to address. And they learned when talking to millennials that no, there was no real problem because people were happy with how Google Maps was working.
Okay.
So then they changed to, okay, we really want to provide the solution. Vijay, just give me one.
Yeah, sure.
That was my dog wanting to go out of the office.
Okay.
So then they pivoted to providing the solution to delivery drivers. So packages, so Amazon has delivery drivers, and so delivery drivers have a certain number of packages they have to deliver every day.
Okay.
And so having augmented reality-based navigation could help them.
Okay.
But to their credit, what they did was they really spend time with the drivers. So they used to drive behind the trucks. They drove hundreds of miles, and they realized that the real problem is not in finding the door at which a package needs to be delivered. It's really finding the package in the back of the truck once you reach a door, right? So you can see how much they had to spend time with customers to really understand that problem that needs to be solved. And the founders, when they first realized this, when they came back and reported, it was interesting because they were like, these drivers don't even take lunch breaks because they're so busy because of the time that they're spending in the back of the truck that they don't have time for lunch. And that's the extent to which you need to care about a customer's problem, which is, wow, like they are really suffering because of this pain that they have. And in their case, they're now building an augmented reality solution for drivers to find packages in the back of the truck so that they can deliver it more efficiently.
Okay. Professor Shiva, when you're saying customer, you need to be very interactive with the customer and identify their problems. So what do we understand by customer? Are they the people who are running industries in the industries, or any customer? What kind of customers?
So we have our startups, Vijender, they are both B2B startups and B2C startups, right? So if you're a B2C startup, then you are selling directly to consumers, right? Like people like you and me. So like if I'm looking for a pen, then I would go on Amazon or I would go to another e-commerce store and I would order a pen. So I'm a consumer, right? And so we have a lot of our startups that sell directly to consumers, in which case we would ask the founders to go spend time with their customer segment, because even consumers, you can segment them differently, right? Like, are you selling to men or are you selling to women? Okay. So let's say you're selling to women. Okay, then what age group are you selling to? Are you selling to over 50 women, or are you selling to 30 to 50, or are you selling to 20 to 30, right? Try to narrow it down to be more specific. And then even within that group, are you selling to women that have college degrees, or are you selling to women that don't have college degrees, right? So there is better and better definition of who your customer segment is. And we ask them to go spend time with that customer segment in order to really understand the problem that they have. Yeah. We also have B2B startups, and B2B startups will sell to other businesses. Okay. Right. So, like for example, one of our startups is in the warehousing space. Okay. So for them, they sell warehouse space to vendors who want to stock inventory. Okay. Right. And so that they're not going to come to people like you and me and say, do you want warehousing space? Because we don't have the need for it. So in their case, they would have to go spend time with the buyer inside these vendors who will make the decision of what warehousing space to use. Right.
Okay, so Professor, how much success you have got in this CreateX so far, and what were the challenges, or what are the challenges you are facing in this now?
Yeah, so we've launched 230 companies in the last 6 years. And it's not like it's been flat, it's been growing year over year. Year one, we launched 8 companies. And this year we launched 70 companies. So we've been growing from 8 to 70, right?
Okay.
And where we are headed to is we want to really launch 300 companies a year from within Georgia Tech, founded by our students. So that's the number that we are working towards. And so we are somewhere in midstream on that journey. And so to your question, Vijayendra, it's been a remarkable success, this journey so far for CreateX. We worked with over 5,000 students. We've launched 230 companies, and our companies are doing really, really well. Like I said, our most successful company has done over $70 million in revenue. From a size standpoint, our most successful company is close to 100 employees, right? And these are all founded by students. In terms of the big challenge, and I think this is true for any education institution, which is how do you convince the educational institution, from the leadership to the faculty members and to even the students, that entrepreneurial confidence should be part of their education, right? It's a new way, it's a new thinking, and you need to, and it's taken us some time to get to where we are. And I would still think there are people on campus who are still not fully convinced that this should be part of the educational journey. And to me, that is the biggest challenge, which is how do you continue
change
to
the
work?
mindset?
Exactly.
So, Professor, when we say you have opened the company, so university is also having the stake in that, or it's a company only by the students?
It's company only by the students. So that is very unique to what Georgia Tech does, which is we provide a nurturing environment for students to launch companies, but the university takes no stake in the companies right now. And now you might ask, okay, what does the university gain in then doing this? And there are really two levels of benefits. The first level is, if we as educators really believe that entrepreneurial confidence is a life skill that students need to have, then it's our job to then teach that to students, right? And at Georgia Tech, we do really believe that entrepreneurial confidence is a life skill that our students need to have. And then the second level benefit, which is more long-term, is if we have our students go create billion-dollar companies, we are confident that they'll come back and give, right? So they will give philanthropically back to Georgia Tech. And in fact, our founding donor, I mentioned his name is Chris Klaus, he's an alum. He created a company that was bought by IBM for over $1 billion. And our computing building today is named after him. Why? Because he came back after ISS was successful and gave millions of dollars back to Georgia Tech and said, yes, you helped me and you created an environment where I could do this, and I'm going to give back philanthropically. And we are confident that our founders will do it. Our founders do sign a non-binding pledge when they go through our program that says, look, if I'm really successful, I will come back and give. I'll come back and give so that you can serve the next wave of students.
Okay. So, Professor, don't you see some kind of clash of interest here? Like there's a student who is doing PhD and getting scholarship from the university, and he opens the company. As you said, we can open the company for our students in campus also. No, he's running his own company also, and he's getting the scholarship for certain other research activities in the universities. So don't you see some kind of clash of interest here?
Oh, definitely. So if you're an undergrad student or a grad student that is not on the university's payroll, then it's much cleaner, right? Because there is no conflict of interest. You can go off and do it. But if you are an employee of the university, there is a distinct conflict of interest. And the good news is universities have understood this conflict of interest problem better. And so we actually have an office of conflict of interest on campus.
Okay.
And so the moment a PhD student wants to do a startup, he or she would go register with the Office of Conflict of Interest saying, okay, I want to do this. Now help me understand how I can manage this process so that I'm not misusing resources. And they help you come up with a plan. They help you come up with a plan that says, okay, do this, do this, do this. And then if for these decisions, you need to let somebody else take this decision because you cannot take this decision because you won't be objective. And so that's called a conflict of interest management plan. And we put that in place. And that gives the researcher the freedom to operate within the conflict of interest management.
Great. Looks like great. Professor, now back home, like can your model be emulated or followed by people in India, academician in India? What is your take on that?
The short answer is yes, absolutely, right? Because the cost of doing entrepreneurship has come down so much that there is no reason why like universities in India and colleges in India cannot do this. But at the end of the day, the big challenge is really going to be mindset change, right?
Yeah.
So this past December, I visited a bunch of schools in India trying to understand their entrepreneurship initiatives, right?
Okay.
Everything from Indian Institute of Science to IIT Delhi and IIT Madras and IIT Bombay. And I was really impressed by the entrepreneurial ecosystem that these places have created. But I still think they don't yet see this entrepreneurial confidence as being part of the core curriculum. Like
Okay.
so it's they are off on the side, and yes, students can walk in on their own if they're interested and try to participate in it. But I don't think that should be the model, right? The model should really be making entrepreneurship part of your core curriculum as the students are going through their degree program. And I think it will happen. I think I was really impressed with the kind of people that I met, and it's just a matter of time. But that mindset change has to be there, which is this is not a side thing. Like entrepreneurship is not a side activity in addition to your core curriculum. It
Okay.
has to be sort
The
of
part of
embedded into your curriculum.
Okay, so as you just now you mentioned that there is some kind of mindset problem also, which is one of the challenges for making this entire thing very successful. And maybe that number of the people on the other side of the table who do not believe with the idea, maybe more in India. That is what I can say. So, Professor, what is your suggestion to someone who is really interested in making this kind of thing successful? Who is a faculty in some school, faculty in some institute? What is
Yeah.
your suggestion to him to proceed forward? My
Yeah. No,
simple,
so,
Professor, my simple question is, had you
yeah.
been in India, how you
Yeah.
would have proceeded for this?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that question, Vijender, because I do think it eventually reduces to the people,
Yeah.
right? And I don't think my journey would have been remarkably different if it were in India. Like in Georgia Tech, when we started really small, right? Like just like any other startup, which is we said, like I'm part of the electrical and computer engineering department, and
Okay.
so I said, okay, let's just do it within that,
Okay.
right? And there was only one other person that I had to convince, which is our department chair, but
Yeah.
he was already on board. Like he was a co-founder of CreateX, and so we could do it. And then, but once we showed success within EC, then we could expand it to multiple majors, and then we could have expanded to the College of Engineering. And now CreateX serves the whole of the university,
Yeah.
right? And so it's really to encourage faculty members to think of this initiative itself as a startup. Like how, like if you think of this as a startup, how would you prove success in a small fashion and then grow it? I think that's the right way to go. And then the other aspect to all this is resources, right?
Okay.
Because you need to raise resources, and I think India, the model is changing because like we were really fortunate to find this alum who like was also equally passionate to do something like CreateX. And so he ended up giving a large amount of money to us to start the initiative. And so the question is, like if you're doing something like this at Punjab University, for example, can you find successful alums who are motivated enough to change the culture on campus and who are going to say, yeah, here is a gift I'm going to give you for you to do something like this, and if you're successful, I'll give you more money.
Okay. So is this that from your side you outreach to the alum, or they approach you, or what is the kind of
It's
efforts?
both,
Yeah.
right? It's both, because I think successful alums are always looking to give back in a meaningful fashion.
Yeah.
Um, but they're also getting asked for money all the time, right?
Okay.
So they are a little bit sensitive to, okay, is this really worth it? And so part of it is you doing an outreach to convince them, yes, we are capable of implementing this, and let's work together in changing the culture. So
Yeah.
it has to be a bit of
Both
both.
sides. Professor, you just mentioned that you visited some of the schools in India recently. So, what more outreach from CreateX side can we expect in India or Indian institutes from your side?
Right. And so, yes, we do want to, we would love for a CreateX model to be replicated on other campuses, right? There's no question.
Yeah.
It's also a question of bandwidth issue because we are a startup, like I think I've told this multiple times, we are a startup with limited resources and there's only so much that we can do. And so we've done the three ways to look at this, Jayendra. One is any resources that we use in terms of curriculum and slide decks and methodologies, we are always willing to share, right? Like even this conversation, I'm doing this because I think this is important. This is important for the future of education. We're willing to do it. The second is from an individual student standpoint, Georgia Tech now has a pretty thriving online program. Okay. Right, and so we have over 10,000 students now in our online graduate studies, and if you're registered for one of those online programs, you become eligible to participate in CreateX. It doesn't matter that you're in India. So this 70 companies that we launched, there were a bunch of students from India who participated in CreateX because they were registered in the online program. Right, okay. So that's a possibility. The third is, and this is not yet available, but we are actively working on this, is we are putting together what we are calling as CreateX in a box, right? Okay. So all the resources and expertise that we've developed over the 6 years, can we package it in a way that, let's say Punjab University says, I want to do CreateX on campus, we can just hand over the box to them and say, yeah, here is everything in a box that you need to do CreateX on campus, go off and do it. We are hoping that within a year, we will have that ready so that we can start sharing with other universities.
Okay, Professor, you mentioned about these outreach activities of the CreateX, and you said that obviously this online education, if somebody is having, is eligible for that. My next question to you is now for the last 6 years, whatever progress you have told, that is remarkable. What goals you have set for yourself for the next couple of years, if at all you have decided certain things?
Yeah, so we have two big goals, Vijayendra, and one is we want to launch 300 companies a year from within Georgia Tech, right?
300 and so companies per year?
Per year, exactly, right? Okay. And so we are at 70, and so you can see we have to grow 4 to 5 times to get to that goal, right? Okay. The second is we want 100% engagement with our students. What that means is we want every single Georgia Tech student before they graduate to have gone through a CreateX program.
Okay.
Right? It might be just the learn phase. That's okay. But we want every single one of our 30,000 plus students to have gone through a CreateX program before they graduate.
Okay.
Right? And you can see that's a pretty big ask.
So that will become part of curriculum or something. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So, but that CreateX is already part of the curriculum because you can do classes. It's just that students right now come on their own, right? And say, yeah, I want to do a class, but we don't have the capacity to take all the students that show interest. So for example, the 70 companies that we launched this summer, there were 460 teams that applied to get into the program.
Okay.
And we said no to 390 teams because we don't have the capacity to take in all those students. And so it's a capacity problem more than anything else, which is to serve a campus that has 30,000 plus students, we need to be much bigger than where we are right now. So this year we worked with 2,000 students. We think we again have to grow significantly to be able to cater to the entire student body.
Okay, so whatever targets you are mentioning about the Georgia Tech University. So Professor, do you visualize your role outside the confines of the university also?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because again, as academics and as educators, we do care about this model propagating to other universities. And we've started working with sort of local universities here first because we have more access. And that's where this CreateX in a box vision, I think, really can pay off because now there is a clear set. If let's say Punjab University comes and says, look, we want to do CreateX, we'll have a structured thing that we can hand over to them and say, here is how you can recreate CreateX on your campus, right? Okay. And that will come with not just materials, but it will come with expertise and it will come with consulting services that people who have experience with CreateX can help other universities launch it. But to your question, yes, would I love to see CreateX being replicated on every single college and university out there? Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Now, my last question, Professor, is because on this channel, when this video will be uploaded, many maybe professors, researchers, faculty member may be watching you. So, what is your advice to all of them?
I think it's worth sort of thinking about why entrepreneurial confidence is important for the future, right?
Okay.
Of future of that student, future of that university, and future of the country.
Yeah.
Because it's really the entrepreneurial energy that can drive entities forward, right? And
Yeah.
for a country like India, we need a lot more innovation, right? And
Yeah.
I know the country has done remarkably well in the last couple of decades, but I think there is more entrepreneurial energy that is needed to propel the country forward. So
Yes.
I really think this way of thinking about education is so critical, and it reduces to the professors and the researchers to think about, okay, how would I incorporate entrepreneurial thinking in my life and in my interaction with the university. I think it's so important in at multiple levels.
Okay. So, Professor, I come to an end of this entire wonderful session with you. And I'm really thankful you gave your time. I keep on following all your activities. And we would like to see your this CreateX kind of experiment being replicated in many universities in India also. Thanks a lot,
Absolutely.
sir, for giving your time to me.
Yeah. Thanks, Vijayender. This was really fun, but thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir.